I see. Yeah, we're about to live now. Jojalapa, namaste, good evening, and good morning. Thank you so much. So, eDaboo, episode number 59. Today is the day that we are doing the series Friends of Nepal, and we have really esteemed guest today that you already have known, Maureen Drdak, who is an American scholar, an American artist, and her guru, Rabindra Shakya. So we both have here in our studio. So let me welcome them, and let me welcome all of my audiences who have been watching us from your home. So we have Maureen Drdak and Rabindra Shakya. Namaste and welcome to the studio.
Namaste.
Darshakbrin, as we will be doing the bilingual. So with Maureen, I will be it will be in English, whereas with Rabindra, we'll be talking in Nepali. So that your bilingual हुनेछ हैन दर्शकबिन फेरि पनि म यहाँलाई स्वागत गर्दछु है आजको यो साँझ हैन हामी eDaboo को 59th एपिसोडमा हामी लाग्दै छौं आजको जुन हाम्रो यो सिरिज छ फ्रेन्ड्स अफ नेपाल हैन अब यसमा चाहिँ के छ आजको टपिक भन्दाखेरि डिस्कसनको टपिक पर्सपेक्टिभ अफ एन अमेरिकन आर्टिस्ट अन Newah Arden artist. So आजको फर्म्याट हैन कस्तो हुनेछ त भन्दाखेरि हाम्रो स्टिम आर्टिस्ट है Maureen Drdak उहाँले चाहिँ के त भन्दाखेरि यो अमेरिकन पर्सपेक्टिभमा हाम्रो Newah आर्ट के हो र आर्टिस्टको बारेमा उहाँले जनाउनु हुनेछ भने उहाँको गुरु है हाम्रो रविन्द्र साक्य उहाँले चाहिँ के त भन्दाखेरि यो आर्ट उहाँले गरिराख्नु भएको आर्ट बारे चाहिँ के छ कसो छ यहाँहरुको जिज्ञासा त्यसमा उहाँले भन्नुहुनेछ भने म तपाईहरुबाट प्राप्त भएका विभिन्न क्वेशनहरुलाई पनि उहाँहरु समक्ष म राख्ने छु. So in the beginning, so actually this is my duty to introduce my guest, but it's very amazing that this time is overwhelmingly people are asking who Maureen Drdak is. So I have been asking them to visit your website, Maureen, right? So she has a website, Maureen Drdak. So that would be, I think, best way to have her introduction. So I guess that people are just visiting your website. But before we proceed it, I would like to put that question to you and how you are related with Rabindra Shakya. So can you just a little bit give some brief introduction of yourself and Rabindra, and we will just move on to your presentation. That we know that you have a presentation, you have done really work hard on these presentations, right? And then we will just go ahead and we'll watch your presentation and we'll try to understand what is Newah art. Okay, so it goes to the Maureen now.
Well, first I would like to thank you so much, Pramesh, for inviting me and for inviting Rabindra to be on your show. This is such a delightful honor. As you've introduced me already, I'm a Fulbright fellow and a visual artist, and I first came to Nepal in 2005. And to make a long story short, I was just overwhelmed with the magnificence of Newari, physical, the material culture and art of the valley. And what in particular captured my attention during that time, and what is the subject of my work with Rabindra, is the very elite practice of Repousse Metalwork, which is essentially, excuse me, taking two-dimensional sheet metal and creating a three-dimensional form of art. So while this is a very archaic practice, it dates probably from around 4000 BC. It is a very elite practice in the fact that it is extremely difficult. It's a very, very, very difficult material practice being that it takes a tremendous amount of skill with at least a minimum of 10 years for an apprentice to obtain even basic skills. Metal is very unforgiving, and unlike lost wax, cast, bronze methodology, there is basically no stage that the artist can avail themselves of to correct mistakes in the process. So from the very beginning, the artist has to be in full command, not only of his or her process and skill level, but of the vision that they wish to create. The Newahs are the last masters of this elite practice, and I'd really like to share. I hope my presentation shares with Nepalis that are watching the degree to which these masters excel, and leave this presentation with a renewed inspiration to really venerate and appreciate the wonderful treasures that they have within their culture. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to launch this PowerPoint. And so I know Rosan, our wonderful tech guru here, will guide me. So Rosan, I'm going to now access and click the PowerPoint, correct?
Yes, Maureen, go ahead.
Okay, so can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, I'm going to hit from the beginning. So from the perspective of an American artist on Newah arts and artists. So what you're looking in front right here is the Cantos Helios triptych, which is a very large work, which I worked on and completed within Rabindra's Atelier, and will be using this to explore his methods and more works as I proceed. So a bit about myself. I'm a 2011 Fulbright Senior Scholar for Art in Nepal and a graduate of the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts and the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. My Fulbright work, the Prakriti Project, pioneered the first synthesis of Repousse Metalwork and contemporary painting. I studied with arguably the finest living master of this metalworking practice, Master Rabindra Shakya of Patan, Nepal, who is the grandson of historic master Kubra Singh Shakya. I am the only artist working with this material synthesis. The significance of my work was recognized by no less than the late Smithsonian scholar, Dr. Mary Slusser, internationally recognized expert on Nepal and its arts, who described my work with Rabindra as astonishing paintings and a fecund collaboration without antecedents. Over the last decade, my work has been deeply inspired by my travels in Asia, especially the Himalayas, where I conducted my recent 2011 to 12 Fulbright research, and the deserts of the American West. These landscapes are powerful metaphors for the universality of physical and cultural forces in opposition and integration, and my selection and application of materials are reflective of these energies in eternal congress. Growing threats to these sublime geographies and their cultures are the ominous forces of global warming, compounded by demographic expansion and dislocation. Believing that the powerful and expressive potential of indigenous ways of seeing and knowing can be effectively harnessed to contemporary art practice, my work endeavors to engage the viewer on a visceral level, thereby visually accelerating the meaningful apprehension of these growing forces of degradation and dislocation, and increasing awareness of the interrelationship of environment and cultural preservation. The following are a few images from the creation of Cantos Helios, which translates as the Song of the Sun, the production of which was executed in Nepal with the last stage in my studio here outside of Philadelphia. In subsequent slides, I will share more of my work process and work within Rabindra's Atelier in brief video clips. So here is the Cantos Helios triptych, and as its name implies, it is a song of the sun, and it's an homage, meant to be an homage to solar power. So we have three images left to right, representing the sunrise, noon, and sunset of the sun, combining repousse elements within the central flow of the painting, asemic writing, which is a very esoteric graphic device, and combines the integration of painting, crushed minerals and mineral threads, and acrylic work on a wood, archival wood panel. Here is the work in situ, which is currently under exhibition in Parktown Place near the Philadelphia Art Museum. So you can get an idea of the scale of this work. Here is a detail of Noon, the central piece. Here is a brief video that I will play so you'll get an idea of the work. Here is a composite photo showing the audience myself at work within Rabindra's atelier on some of the copper elements that you see in the work here. And this was quite a difficult and challenging piece to work on. I consulted with Rabindra for some time before we began execution of the work. You can see me working on cutting the copper element from its matrix after it's been formed with a chisel in what is called by the neighbors la, which is essentially a pitch that holds the piece in place. Some of the matrices cast-offs taken here for recycling. Some of the elements here before being bundled up into the respective packages and taken back with me on my return flight. In my work, the plastic potential of copper, metal, and crushed stone and mineral aggregates are all explored and exploited as they integrate with the new technical potentials of acrylic paint and mediums in their engagement on the material surface. This synthesis is valued not only for its own unique sensuality, but as an evocative vehicle for visualizing and expressing the collision of cosmic forces on spiritual, physical, and psychological planes. In my current developing body of work, Arden's Mundy, or Burning Worlds, my new synthesis addresses climate change. Each burning world visualizes one of its many terrible faces: firestorms, glacial melt, desertification, superstorms, and ultimately 7 works will complete this series. In this powerful series of work, Drdak unifies ancient and contemporary techniques from opposite ends of the globe to create an exquisitely dramatic expression of the infinitely paradox nature of the universe. My thanks to Asian and American curator Mayor MacArthur for those kind words. So here is the third work in the series, Desicco, the Latin for desiccation or severe desertification. Here you see desiccated animal forms emerging from a scoured surface of the earth. These works are uniformly 48 inches in diameter by 1.5 inches in depth, but actually that's only the wood substrate. The repousse elements themselves are 2 inches in depth at their deepest point. So here you can see Arden's Mundy 3 in situ with the Cantos Helios triptych behind it at Parktown Place. Here is a detail of Arden's Mundy 3, and you can see the forms closer up here. Here are the 4 works that I've completed to date. So from the upper left, we have Arden's Mundy 1, Incendiarium or Inferno. Arden's Moon, which represents firestorms, the growing phenomenon worldwide of superstorms that are pyrotechnic in nature. Number 2, we see Arden's Mundy 2, Conflitura, which represents glacial melt. Number 3, Desicco, which we've just visited. And the most recent one, Arden's Mundy 4, Tempestatis, which represents the growing phenomenon of super cyclones, superstorms, and hurricanes, and the phenomenon of bombogenesis, which is on the increase. The repousse is a very ancient art of creating 3-dimensional form from essentially 2-dimensional sheet metal. As a practice, it dates from 4000 BCE. My guru, colleague, and friend is Newah repousse master Rabindra Shakya. Rabindra's celebrated family of masters traces its lineage all the way to 1564 AD. Rabindra and his 2 brothers are the finest living masters of repousse metalwork living anywhere in the world today. And here is a slide of Rabindra working on a particularly exquisite face of Padmasambhava. So impressive. I find it difficult to describe how in awe I am of Rabindra in looking at this work. Here is a partial photograph of Rabindra's atelier in Imadol. This was the original familial atelier. which is now augmented by 2 more ateliers, each belonging to Rabindra's respective elder and younger brother. But here you can get an idea of the scale of the atelier. If you can imagine this photograph in having an additional 30% more space, you'll get an idea of the main workplace, but that is not the entirety of his facility. Global citizens are rediscovering this historic family and its elite practitioners of this ancient and endangered practice. On my last visit in 2019 in February, I had the great pleasure of introducing the new ambassador for the United States, Randy Berry, who came and visited and stayed with us for well over an hour, and who was absolutely delighted and blown away so much that he requested through the U.S. Embassy a piece of my work and a piece of Rabindra's to hang in his residence for his 3-year term. Here's another photo of my relationship with Rabindra that encapsulates our long relationship, beginning first in 2009 when I first came to study with Rabindra under a self-funded feasibility study to see if my idea of combining repousse and painting could work. I came back, fortunately, in 2011 and 12 under Fulbright aegis and tried to return almost annually if I can, and not only to visit with all my wonderful friends and my guru, but to study and increase my skills and work with all my artisan brothers, as I so love to do. Here is another grab of an idea to give the viewers the scope at which these 3 brothers work. Essentially, in the very beginning, middle of this photo, you can see Raj Kumar, the eldest brother, being honored by the late King Birendra. You can see on the upper left-hand corner, in fact, I don't know if my cursor is visible, but here is Rabindra himself standing after doing his service as a monk, and my husband in the background here at his elder brother's atelier. Over to the upper right is the younger brother's atelier, and down in the lower left, Rabindra's atelier. And then over to the lower left, you can see an image of, this work has been completed, but a colossal, a very stupendous, colossal Padmasambhava, which now stands in the remote place of Takala, Bhutan, which houses within itself a fully functioning monastery. And it supersedes our Statue of Liberty at 49 meters, something for which Nepalis everywhere should be justly proud. This was a joint endeavor of all the brothers working together, though Raj Kumar himself was on site as the director. And I want to stress that this was an entirely a family effort. So once again, here's a close-up of Arden's Mundy 4, Tempestatis. This work, again, addresses the global phenomenon of superstorms and all their manifestations, and his own exhibit in the Art of the State in Pennsylvania at the State Museum in Harrisburg. Here's an example of an early stage in the formation of my works where the repousse elements have been completed and are being laid down according to their pattern. So here you can see forms that have already completed their development. Here is a piece here that will begin its development. You can see the form has only been raised around the edge, and here's the form still locked into its matrix, which has not yet been cut. Here you can see a detail of that same view of that same piece. Here is a little video for you to get an overall view of the work, a little bit more of a close look. Here is a close-up of Arden's Mundy 1, Inferno. This piece was done with a slightly thinner copper, so I was experimenting and ripping the work in a couple of places here, something which I think I will experiment a little bit more with in the future. Here's a detail where you can see some of those controlled tears a little bit better. Here is another video with accompanying thematic music. Here is a close-up of Arden's Mundy 2 Conflatura, which again expresses the face of the global phenomenon of glacial melt and permafrost thawing. This particular photograph was taken from an exhibition installation of the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. Here's a detail of Conflatura. And so you can see the mineral threads, the abraded paint surfaces, and you can see using the very fine aggregates of the finest alumina and acrylic, I experiment with leading and weaving very fine threads across the copper surfaces. Here's Conflatura in installation at the Academy in 2019. So now an explanation of my process through a series of very brief video vignettes courtesy of videographer Gary Warnell. So here we have Aeolus, which was a work that I completed, the metalwork pieces, the copper element pieces that I completed while working at Rabindra's Atelier in February of last year. This piece is now on its way to an Italian collector. Aeolus means the father of the winds in Roman mythology. Here's a detail of Aeolus, where you can see a combination of abraded surfaces, thick paint aggregates integrating with the repousse elements. Here's a little video of me working the studio, explaining my process.
Looking at the design here, it's not possible to visualize it with accuracy because these forms are now in their making stage. But what will happen ultimately is when I bring them back to the States and do some final refinement, they will be cut and released from their matrices. They'll be cut along the border lines here, allowing for a few occasionally strategically placed flanges to secure them onto an archival custom tondo or wooden panel, which has been prepared, painting completed to my satisfaction for the first stage. After these pieces are fixed to the surface, the final painting will begin. And at that point, the piece really comes alive and presents new possibilities. It's always my favorite ultimate stage of the painting.
So here we see, oh, I'm sorry, we passed here. So here we have another video of myself here, and I'm going through the annealing process. This process is required for every element of the painting, and the actual process itself for each element will be repeated several times. So the piece has to be fired to restore plasticity to the metal because the molecular structure falls out of alignment during the hammering process and has to be brought back into realignment through the application of high heat. So when the repousse element attains a nice blackened fire scale color, and when the sound of it dropping on the surface is evocative of thick leather, I know that the piece is finished and ready for the acid bath, which we will see right now. Dropping the work in the acid bath rips off the fire scale and restores the piece of metal to its original beautiful pink color, which I like to refer to affectionately as baby ass pink. That will take off the fire scale, and we'll leave it in there for a few minutes. We'll then take it out, and we will then rinse it off in water and dry it and begin the whole process again. Here is Rabindra working on this magnificent Padmasambhava. I never tire of watching Rabindra work. It's such a gloriously privileged but rare opportunity to watch a master of his stature at work. Here we have a sampling of some hammers and chisels so that the viewer can get an idea of me working, what it's like very close up to see me hammering away at this piece, which, as its color demonstrates, has recently been annealed. And here we have a close-up of some of the hammers and chisels. I'm very privileged to have a set of anvil, its support, quite a selection of double-headed hammers or mugas, and a full selection of chisels made expressively for me by Rabindra, for which I am eternally grateful. And I may have the only set of its kind outside of Nepal. These are very, very difficult to make. Master blacksmiths must be engaged to do this kind of work. And they are, like every other discipline, starting to become an endangered practice. So if any of the viewers would like to learn much more about me, please visit my website, which is simplymyname.com. Naturally, I'm on Instagram. You can find several pages. Just tap in my name in the search engine, several pages on Facebook. And I would like to conclude by saying Dhanyavad. Thank you to all my viewers. It's just a tremendous honor and pleasure to have been able to present this to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen, for your presentation. It's awesome. So being a Newah, and when I was watching your presentation, I feel that I'm enlightened. The way that things that it works, I just relate with the 5 elements. So is there any particular, concept working with the 5 elements that I saw that you were working on the fire with those coppers? And again, yes, you are putting those on the water, right? So is there anything as such that you want to just give us some idea if it is related with any 5 elements of the nature?
Well, that's a very fascinating way of looking at it, Pramesh. Well, first of all, the wood, one of the 5 elements, is present naturally enough in the substructure of the tando itself, and interestingly enough, in the Repousse elements, the beautiful Turanas that grace the valley, many of those copper Turanas actually are supported underneath by wood structures that support them. So wood is definitely present. It has to be soft enough to receive the works that are fastened on them, onto the surface of the tando. Obviously, the crushed elements and of the minerals that I use and the metal itself is obviously in play. Water plays a large part by virtue of the fact that I'm working with acrylic paints for the reason that their new, more sophisticated structural properties allow them to integrate with the metal itself. So and the air and the fire is self-evident. And if we want to throw in the ether, that would be the Purusha part of the property. And so I like to think I've immersed myself quite nicely in the continuum of the cosmos.
Thank you, Maureen. दर्शकबिन है म अब रविन्द्रजीतिर जान्छु है। रविन्द्रजी हैन तपाईलाई यो प्रोग्राममा हामीले निम्त्याउन पाउँदा हैन साह्रै खुसी लागेको छ। एक्चुअली मैले यो प्रोग्राम हेर्नुस् न मौरिनसँग गर्न खोजेको थिएँ, तर सी हैज रियली अ ग्रेट रेस्पेक्ट अन यु है। मेरो गुरु पनि सँगै हुनुपर्छ, मैले गुरुको बारे पनि केही बोल्नुपर्ने हुन्छ। तपाईहरुको यो नेवा कल्चर राम्रो छ हैन, यी कुराहरु पनि मैले केही बोल्नुपर्ने हुन्छ। त्यसकारण रविन्द्रजी यहाँ हुनु जरुरी छ भनेर उहाँले भन्नुभयो हैन। It's really a pleasure to having you here, Ravindji. अनि अब
हजुर म्याम
यो तपाईँको जुन तपाईँले गरिराख्नु भएको आर्ट छ नि होइन एज
हजुर
पर मोरिनले के भन्छ त भन्दाखेरि यो विश्वमा नै दुर्लभ आर्ट हो होइन अहिलेको समयमा
हजुर हजुर
यो आर्ट गर्ने हुने जम्मा 2 भाइ मात्रै बाँकी हुनुहुन्छ होइन भन्ने कुरा गर्नु भएको छ अलिकति तपाईँको यो आर्ट बारे भनिदिनुहोस् न त
हुन्छ
के हो यो
हजुर हजुर सर्वप्रथम तपाईँलाई धेरै धन्यवाद यो हाम्रो यो मुख्य नेवा आर्ट चाहिँ नेवा आर्ट त हाम्रो काठमाडौँ उपत्यकामा धेरै छ होइन विभिन्न विधाहरू छ जस्तै चित्रकला प्रस्तरकला भन्नाले त्यो ढुङ्गामा गर्ने कला त्यो काष्ठकला भयो त्यस्तै धातुकला यो धातुकलामा पनि विभिन्न विधाहरू छ जस्तै कि तामालाई पगालेर ढालेर बनाउने कला त्यो अर्को एउटा विधा चाहिँ हाम्रो धातु पत्रकला यो मेरो मुख्य पेसा चाहिँ यो धातु पत्रकलामा हो यो धातु पत्रकला भन्नाले चाहिँ अब कुनै पनि धातुको जस्तै कि सुन चाँदी तामा पित्तल जुन पनि हुन्छ त्यसको पत्र पाटामा चाहिँ हामीले कुँदेर कुनै एउटा औजारले हामीले कुँदेर त्यसको आकृति निकाल्ने कला हो यो कलालाई चाहिँ अब विकास भएको यो कला हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ मानव सभ्यता अनुसार चाहिँ यो पछि विकास भएको कला हो प्राचीनमा चाहिँ त्यो ढुङ्गाको काष्ठ कला चाहिँ पहिला नै थियो होइन यो कला चाहिँ त्यसपछि मात्र विकास भएको कला हो यो कलालाई चाहिँ अब अङ्ग्रेजीमा भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ इम्बोसिङ वर्क हो होइन तर चलन चल्तीमा अहिले पत्रिकामा चाहिँ रेपोसे आर्ट भनेर चाहिँ भन्ने गरिन्छ रेपोसे भनेको चाहिँ यो खास फ्रेन्च वर्ड हो फ्रेन्च वर्डमा चाहिँ त्यो रेपोसे भनेको अर्थ चाहिँ टु पुस ब्याक अगाडिपट्टिबाट थोकेर पछाडिपट्टिबाट आकृति निकाल्ने त्यस्तो पद्धति कला हो यो यसलाई चाहिँ अब पत्रिकामा त्यसमा भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ रेपोसे आर्ट भनिन्छ यही कला हो हाम्रो मुख्यतया यो कला चाहिँ नेपालमा हाम्रो सुरु भएको चाहिँ लिच्छविकालदेखि सुरु भएको देखिन्छ होइन अनि यो मल्लकालमा चाहिँ यसको एकदम विकास भएको चरम बिन्दुमा पुगेको विकासको चरम बिन्दुमा पुगेको देखिन्छ जस्तै यो उदाहरणको लागि भन्दाखेरि नेपालमा सबभन्दा पुरानो अहिले भेटिएको यो कलामा बनाएको वस्तु चाहिँ हाम्रो चाङ्गु नारायणको भित्र एउटा मूर्ति छ गुरु दशना भन्ने यो चाहिँ सन् 660 बनाएको यो चाहिँ सबभन्दा पुरानो मानिन्छ यो तामापत्र कलाको यस्तै अब तामापत्र कलाको उदाहरण दिनु पर्दाखेरि सबभन्दा राम्रो कला चाहिँ हाम्रो भक्तपुरको दरबार स्क्वायरमा त्यो गोल्डन गेट भन्ने छ त्यो पनि तामा पाटाबाट बनाएको हो यसको यो रेपोसेको एउटा ज्वलन्त उदाहरण हो यो चाहिँ एकदम राम्रो मानिने यस्तै चाङ्गु नारायणको तोरण भयो विभिन्न मन्दिरमा अब तोरणहरू गजुरहरू झलरहरू राख्ने गरिन्छ त्यो धेरै जस्तो चाहिँ तामापाटाबाट बनाइन्छ अनि त्यसमा सुन लगाइन्छ होइन जस्तै मन्दिरमा त्यो सुनको गजुर सुनको छानो भन्छ नि सुनकै बनाउँदाखेरि धेरै नै खर्च लाग्ने भयो होइन त्यसले तामा चाहिँ उपयुक्त साधन भयो जसमा चाहिँ अब सुन राम्रोसँग बस्छ अनि तामामा अरूभन्दा चाहिँ काम गर्न अझ सजिलो पनि हुन्छ यस्तै यो हाम्रो चाहिँ अब प्रमुख मानव सभ्यता विकास क्रमसँगै त्यो पछि विकास भएको कला हो यो अहिले चाहिँ अब यी कलाबाट चाहिँ अब विभिन्न मठ मन्दिरमा डेकोरेसन गर्ने सामान सँगसँगै अब हाम्रो ठुल्ठुलो मूर्तिहरू पनि बनाउन सकिन्छ यसबाट बनाउँदाखेरि अब तामा पाटाबाट बनाउने भएर अरूभन्दा चाहिँ अलि हलुको लाइट पनि हुन्छ यसले चाहिँ अब अहिलेको जमानामा चाहिँ अब ट्रान्सपोर्टेसनको लागि सजिलो भएछ यो लाइट हुने भएर हलुको हुने भएर अब निर्यात गर्न पनि अलि सजिलो छ। यस्तै यो हाम्रो यो यो कला चाहिँ हाम्रो पुर्ख्यौली पेसा हो। यो चाहिँ हाम्रो बाजे बराजुदेखि गर्दै आएको पुर्ख्यौली पेसालाई मैले चाहिँ अहिलेसम्म निरन्तर दिइरहेको हो। यस्तै अब हाम्रो यो काम चाहिँ अब पहिला त गाह्रै थियो। पहिला तामापाटाहरू पाउँदैन होइन। पहिला तामापाटा त्यो पगालेर पिटेर पाटा बनाएर मूर्तिहरू बनाउँथ्यो। अब आजकल चाहिँ त्यो तामापाटा नै सिधा नै बजारमा किन्न पाउँछ। अहिले चाहिँ काम गर्न चाहिँ अलि सजिलो भएछ। अब यस्तै मेरो पेसा भन्नाले चाहिँ यो के धातु पाटामा अगाडिबाट ठोकेर पछाडिबाट आकृति निकालेर यो मूर्ति बनाउने, मुख्यतया अब अहिलेको काम चाहिँ मूर्ति बनाउने नै हो।
हजुर, धन्यवाद है रविन्द्रजी। म फेरि तपाईँको आउँछु है त। So it's been really great that yes, Rabindra was explaining about the art that he was doing. So I have so many questions that is flooding right now. Among them, right? So this is from Maureen. So how do you see in here? I mean, if I put the direct word that they're asking that in your perspective, what is Newah art?
What is Newah art? That's a fascinating question. Well,
yep.
Newah art essentially are those material expressions of the spirit of the Newah people. And that definition applies to any ethnic group or any national group. The material practices of the respective people, which embodies those spiritual and psychological characteristics of the people and gives them form. So when you look at Newah art, you are looking at an art that is, and we're speaking of traditional arts right now, arts that are oriented towards the divine. And in their orientation towards the divine, there are many manifestations, many pursuits of beauty in many forms, each containing and expressing an inherent psychological and emotional and ideological phenomenon or characteristic. But the one thing for me about Newari art that is extremely valuable to me is the exquisite aesthetic quality of Newari art, and not just in the metal arts, but also in the painting arts and in the cultural arts. There's a particularly exquisite balance of the humane with the divine, in that the respect for the properties of the materials themselves are highly sophisticated. The forms are particularly elegant. There's a particular elegance to figures in Newari art, even though the forms that they take and the particular murtis and whatnot are also shared a larger part of Indic culture. I can spot a piece of Newari sculpture like a mile off. Likewise for the painting, and there's a lot of speculation now about how Newari art and particularly painting was really the major influence, not only throughout the Himalayan regions, but by extension in China and in Mongolia and the larger Himalayan regions. And one might argue, if you really were moving to trace it pretty effectively, possibly over even as far as into Japan, by virtue of the fact that if you look at the great painter and great artist Arnico, many of the great murals up in the monasteries, up in Lumantang, the Chupten and Chamba monasteries up there, particularly my favorite is the Chupten because of the the predominance of figurative work, the compositions, the draftsmanship, the elegance, the balance, the action, the dynamic form balanced with a real sense of spatial sophistication is unique to Newah art. It is genuinely unique. It is. I have not seen that kind of balance replicated in other art forms. And also, what I think is particularly wonderful and lovely is the way that the art forms, the art forms that would be in other cultures somewhat separated by firewalls, are fully integrated within the Newah Valley. In one building, you will find examples of elegant painting, repousse work integrated within the architectural structure of a beautiful building, which in and of itself is geometric perfection. So there's a particular sensibility of, and a felicitous juncture of the aesthetic, the humane, and the divine that I find, and the sensual as well as the aesthetic. Polarities are beautifully contained within the characteristics of Newah art.
Thank you, Maureen. Actually, you make me feel really proud.
Well, that is tremendously rewarding to me, Pramesh, that I can do my small part there to communicate. And I really think that Newah arts really, I'm such a champion of them, and I really so strongly feel that their contribution to world art needs to be much better known.
Thank you. And I have next question for you, which is a general question that it came in, that why you chose to go and learn this Newah art?
Okay, all right. So this is the origin story. So I first came to Nepal in 2005, and there's an even more interesting story to preface this, but time does not allow. But having come to the valley, I was immediately overcome with the magnificence of the material culture that I was witnessing, and my main intention for those first couple of trips was to go trekking in the Himalayas. But spending the brief amount of time I did in the valley, I very intensively pursued as many of the finer temples that I could. And in particular, what struck me, because I had never seen any elements of it in other in Europe or in other places in the world, was the beautiful way in which repousse, in a highly developed and very refined form, was integrated within the architecture of the great mandirs, the magnificent toranas. And the toranas at one time had been obviously heavily fire gilded, but through the passage of the centuries, the elements had their way with the metal, and what was left on most of the great toranas were very varying passages of heavy gold in some places, but almost the erasure or very thin tissues of gold on other elements of the copper. And when I looked at those forms, they reminded me of painting. And I thought, that's strange. I'm looking at metal sculpture. How could that? But the analogy kept, it stayed within my mind. And as the months and a few years passed, I became increasingly curious about it, to the point where I just decided I would dip into my savings and take a trip and see if I could actually visualize my idea. So I funded myself in a 2-month study with Rabindra to explore it, and that was the beginning, as they say, of the tale.
Great. So, I mean, the way that you have put the words is amazing. Amazing that even I didn't realize that it is in that category, that when you are talking about around the world, when you put the Newah art, is kind of a unique, and you have already clarified in so many ways, and you have related that with I believe that you have already given the idea of how it is I'm not getting the word actually. So what I was telling is
that's what good art does. It steals the words from you. That's what artists supposed to take the place of the words.
Now let me go back to your piece of work that you have just showed us, right, on your presentation. That now, I mean, how do you define your art now when you combine or when you fusion the Newah art in your art? Is there any particular, I mean, did you invent or did you discover any new idea of the art, or what is it? How do you define it?
I don't think I'm discovering anything new. I think what I'm doing, having had the tremendous benefit and privilege of studying with a master such as Guruji Rabindra here, first of all, I become very much aware of the long, noble, and very high tradition that he represents. And so I am acutely aware of being respectful conceptually, as well as procedurally with the work that I do. So I use the hand-formed tools that Rabindra has so graciously provided me with. And I feel that my position as a contemporary Western artist is always first to be mindful and respectful of this tradition. But from my vantage point, what I can bring to the tradition, bring to the practice, is an expression of its potentials for the contemporary artist, whose practice is outside of the traditional religious constraints. So learning the basic techniques and allowing myself to depart respectfully from a lot of those procedures, I just decided that I wanted to experiment with what I like to call a biomorphic treatment of the metal surface, whereby the metal alludes to biological or animal or plant forms without necessarily being precise in its depiction of those forms. So it becomes kind of a poetic suggestion. Also my use of the hammers, as opposed to the very disciplined and traditional use of the chisels with the hammers, which is a mainstay of what Rabindra and his artisans so skillfully practice. And I want to stress here that it is an extraordinarily challenging and disciplined practice, but it takes more than the discipline and the practice. You've got to have some very serious talent chops to be able to work the metal. There are a lot of people that would like to do it, but they just can't do it. They just do not possess the inner software, if you like, to be able to skillfully handle the materials. And that's one reason why this practice is becoming increasingly endangered, because it takes, as I mentioned earlier, a minimum of 10 years to really apprentice an artisan worthy of working in these studios. And it's grueling, and the pay is, so many people want the fast money, for a minimum amount of exertion. You become, in many ways, a priest or a monk yourself in deciding to pursue the craft. So my treatment of the metal, my approach through using it in a new expressive direction, is not only to pay homage to my teacher and to the practice, but is to demonstrate to young Nepalis or to any other contemporary artists that contemporary artists need to look more closely at their traditional forms and investigate them for the new expressive potentials that may be as yet unrealized within those practices, and to expand awareness of them through their work, and to celebrate the great long traditions behind them in the process.
Thank you, Maureen. And the next that I have a question is, the theme or the project that you did was the Prakriti. So whenever we talk about Newah art, then always, yes, the Newah art is intertwined with the spirituality. So since you have been exposed with the Newah people, Newah culture, Newah tradition, right? Would you like to tell your experience regarding this Prakriti as well as spirituality in within the Newah people and within the art? How do you associate with it?
That's a very big question, Pramesh. That's a very big. That's like hours of conversation. Well, when I'm in Nepal, I'm very much aware of the fact that I am now situated and walking through a culture for which the divine is never very far out of reach. There is no really definitive and hard separation between the secular and the divine, the way you would commonly experience most Western cultures. And part of that, I think, is also relates to the fact that Nepali and Newari culture, while it does respect the individual, is still largely embedded within the larger sense of community. And I don't want to use the word collective because it's kind of a loaded word politically these days, but community is very much a part of the Newah characteristic. And you find that sense of responsibility reflected not only in their social interactions, but also in their larger sense of relationship with the divine. I often joke that they're like, that the Newars are like the Italians of Asia. Like every third day is a feast day of some sort, dedicated to the gods. And, there's a lot of devotional attention paid towards food and family and beauty, as all playing fundamental roles in nourishing not only the body, but also the senses and the psyche and the mind, that these things are much more integrated. And even though there may not be the level of material wealth in Newah culture than there is in Western culture, there is an overabundance, I have found, of spiritual wealth and, how should I say, a kind of attentiveness to the poetry of life.
Wow.
So that's my haiku version.
Thank you, Maureen, yes, for elaborating all those things. Now I'd like to go back to Rabindra. रविनजी है अब हाम्रो मौरिनजीले त धेरै कुराहरू गर्नुभयो हैन, हाम्रो आर्टको बारे कुराहरू गर्नुभएको छ। अनि फेरि तपाईले के भन्नुभयो त भन्दाखेरि यो चाहिँ तपाईको पुस्तैनी हैन, माथि हाम्रो बिस्तारै सबैले माथिबाट सिक्दै आउनु भएको भयो आफ्नो भन्दा पूर्वजसँग हैन। भने यो अवस्थामा तपाईले आफ्नो कुबेर सिंह साक्य हैन त तपाईको हजुरबा है, अब कुबेर सिंह साक्यदेखि रविन्द्र साक्यसम्म आइपुग्दाखेरि त टाइम त लाग्यो हैन। एउटा त अब यो सिक्न कतिको गाह्रो भयो एउटा, र अर्को के त भन्दाखेरि कुबेर सिंह साक्यको आर्ट र रविन्द्र साक्यको आर्टमा के डिफरेन्ट छ त अब अहिले आएर, कस्तो किसिमको भएको छ, अलिकति यसमा भनिदिनुस् न।
हजुर, हुन्छ। अब यो कुबेर सिंह चाहिँ मेरो बाजे हो। उहाँ चाहिँ एकदम ठुलो आर्टिस्टै हुनुहुन्छ। उहाँ पनि अब धेरै नै तामा पाटामा चाहिँ ठुल्ठुलो मूर्ति नै बनाउनुहुन्थ्यो। अब पहिला त फोटोहरू छैन हैन, अब हामीले घरमा चाहिँ स्केचहरू भेट्छ, जस्तै 12 फिट 15 फिट 8 फिट त्यस्तो स्केचहरू। यस्तै बाजेले बनाउनु भएको यो 12 फिटको मैत्री बुद्धको स्केच चाहिँ अहिले त्यहाँ हाम्रो तपाईको त्यहाँ अमेरिकामा एउटा म्युजियममा स्केच चाहिँ राखेको छ, रिप्रेजेन्ट दिएको म्युजियमको लागि। मेरो बाजेको पालामा बनाउने त्यो बेला पनि ठुल्ठुली मूर्ति बनाउँथ्यो मेरो बाजेले। ऊ बेला चाहिँ अब त्यो औजार चाहिँ ऊ बेला पनि आफै बनाउनु पर्छ, टुल्स चाहिँ बजारमा किन्न पाउँदैन। अहिले पनि टुल्स त आफै बनाउने हो। अहिले फरक के भएछ भने मेरो बाजेको पालामा मूर्तिहरू ठुलो बनाउँदाखेरि होइन, राम्रो त राम्रै छ, तर जोइनिङहरू ठुलो मूर्ति बनाएको सानो सानो टुक्राहरू जोड्नुपर्छ। जोड्दाखेरि अब वेल्डिङ गर्नु पर्यो नि जोड्नेले। पहिलामा चाहिँ अब वेल्डिङ गर्ने छैन, अनि त्यो किला ठोकेर जोइनहरू जोड्थ्यो। अनि त्यो जोइनमा चाहिँ अलिकति रफ देख्थ्यो। अब अहिले मेरो पालामा आएर चाहिँ अब ठुल्ठुलो मूर्ति बनाउँदाखेरि चाहिँ अब बजारमा अहिले छ नि वेल्डिङको मेसिनहरू पाउँछ, विभिन्न नयाँ प्रविधिहरू भित्रिएछ। जस्तै फाइलिङ गर्ने भयो, ग्राइन्डिङ गर्ने, वेल्डिङ गर्ने चाहिँ अहिले विभिन्न औजारहरू पाउँछ। यो औजारहरूले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ अहिले ठुलो मूर्ति बनाउँदाखेरि अझै सजिलो भएछ। अहिले ठुलो मूर्ति बनाउँदाखेरि चाहिँ पहिला भन्दा चाहिँ अहिले फिनिसिङमा चाहिँ धेरै राम्रो हुन्छ। पहिला चाहिँ जोड्दाखेरि रसाइन हाल्ने सानो मात्र रसाइन हाल्ने पोसिबल छ। अहिले चाहिँ अब वेल्डिङ एउटा आएकोले, वेल्डिङ गर्ने मेसिन आएकोले चाहिँ अब ठुल्ठुलो मूर्ति बनाउँदाखेरि पनि हामीले एकदम क्वालिटीमा चाहिँ विकासै भएको छ भन्नुपर्छ। पहिला भन्दा चाहिँ अहिले हजुर अहिले फिनिसिङ चाहिँ अहिले स्मुथै हुन्छ।
हजुर, भनेपछि तपाईँको हिसाबमा चाहिँ पहिले भन्दा अझ राम्रो किसिमबाट फाइन भएर चाहिँ गएको छ होइन? हजुर
हजुर हजुर।
अनि अब तपाईँको जुन छ नि आर्टलाई यस्तोसँग एप्रिसिएट गर्नु भएको छ हाम्रो मौरिनले पनि होइन। अब मैले त पत्रिकाहरूबाट पढेको होइन, तपाईँ र अब तपाईँको फ्यामिलीले जुन बनाउनु भएको ठुलो मूर्ति छ होइन, त्यो भुटानमा गएर तपाईँहरूले राख्नुभयो भन्नुभएको छ। त्यसको बारे अलिकति भनिदिनुहोस् न, त्यो भुटानमा जुन गएको थियो नि तपाईँहरूको?
भुटानमा चाहिँ एउटा प्रोजेक्ट आएको थियो होइन, त्यो भोटेना तकेला भन्ने ठाउँमा। त्यहाँ चाहिँ मेरो दाजुको नेतृत्वबाट चाहिँ 115 फिटको गुरु पद्मसम्मको मूर्ति बनाउनु भएको थियो। जस्तै यो 4-5 वर्ष अगाडि कम्प्लिट भएको थियो। यो प्रवृत्ति पनि धातु पत्रकलाबाट बनेको। जस्तै तपाईँको त्यो अमेरिकामा न्युयोर्कमा लिबर्टी अफ स्ट्याचु छ नि, यो एउटा पनि धातु पत्रकलाहरूको ज्वलन्त उदाहरण हो। यो फ्रान्सबाट बनाएको रहेछ होइन। यो पनि धातु पत्रकला तामा पाटाबाटै बनाएको रहेछ, सेम प्रोसेस हो। त्यस्तै प्रोसेसले अब भुटानमा चाहिँ अब 115 फिटको तामा पाटाबाटै एउटा विशाल मूर्ति निर्माण भएको छ। जस्तै 4 वर्ष अगाडि चाहिँ कम्प्लिट भएको थियो, 4-5 वर्ष अगाडि। त्यो पनि धातु पत्रकलाबाट त्यो अहिले वेल्डिङको त्यो विकास भएकोले जोड्ने त्यो वेल्डिङ मेसिनहरू छ र चाहिँ हाल्ने प्रविधि नयाँ आएकोले चाहिँ त्यो पोसिबल भएको हो। त्यस्तो ठुलो पनि अब वेल्डिङ गर्ने हामीले टुक्रा बनाउने हो, अनि त्यो जोडेर चाहिँ एकदम ठुलो। त्यो मूर्ति नै एउटा गुम्बा हो, मूर्तिभित्र नै गुम्बा छ। बाहिर आकृति चाहिँ मूर्ति छ, भित्र चाहिँ गुम्बा नै हो।
भनेपछि तपाईँले स्ट्याच्यु अफ लिबर्टीको कुरा गर्नुभयो, करिब त्यही कन्सेप्टमा नै बनेको रहेछ। भनेपछि के आज हामीले स्ट्याच्यु अफ लिबर्टी बनाउनु पर्यो भने सकिन्छ होला त?
सकिन्छ। हजुर क्वालिटी पनि राम्रै आउँछ अहिले चाहिँ। हजुर अहिले विभिन्न यस्तो त्यो मन्दिरहरू मूर्तिहरू बनाउने त ठुल्ठुलो होडबाडी चाहिँ चलेछ भन्नु पर्यो नि। जस्तै इन्डियामा हजुर इन्डियामा सबभन्दा ठुलो बनायो त्यो कुन चाहिँ लिबर्टी अफ युनिटी भनेर, युनिटी स्ट्याच्यु भनेर। त्यो चाहिँ कास्टिङ जस्तो छ। हजुर यस्तो तामा पाटाबाट चाहिँ अब जस्तै ठुल्ठुलो मूर्तिहरू चाहिँ बनाउन सकिन्छ अब चाहिँ।
म फेरि तपाईहरुमा आउँछु है त। म अब let me go to the Maureen for a moment. So Maureen, right, he has just encouraged me, and even he says that, right, even if now in this time that if somebody asks him to build the Statue of Liberty, he says, yes, we can do it.
I have absolutely no doubt.
Great.
And you want to know something else, Parash? He may be the only guy that might be able to do it.
Awesome. Maureen, I have one more question for you that it came from the audience. The audience is asking that if you have experience in Nepal, so you must be exposed with some other form of arts with some other ethnic groups. So the C is asking that how the Newah art is different than any other form of Nepali arts when you compare with the other arts in Nepal. If you have
Newah arts were fully, well, how should I put this? Newah art was overwhelmingly fully formed before the Gorkhali entrance into the valley and influence in the valley. And we see elements within Gorkhali art that are obviously from the subcontinent. And the stresses look further towards the subcontinent. Whereas it would seem, even though Newah art, and I have not made the study, I should really go back and read Dr. Slusser's seminal Nepal Mandala here on this. But it would appear that even though Newah art has oriented itself substantially towards the subcontinent by virtue of the fact that it is a basically, and I know this is a loaded word, but I'm going to use it for convenience, syncretic by virtue of the fact that it has absorbed from India, it has absorbed from the surrounding Himalayan cultures, influences the unique vision that has resulted from the confluence of those long imbibed aesthetic qualities, has resulted in a particularly unique and harmonious aesthetic entity. I mean, it's very interesting because as I find myself grappling for the right words to describe this, I keep coming up with the word Italian, and I'm asking myself silently, why am I doing that? And I think the reason for that is that much of Newah art reminds me of a particular type of humanistic quality that I think the art of Florence shares. Now, somebody that would listen to this would say, oh, well, that's absurd. That's over in Italy, and this is over in, the heart of Asia over here. How could they there's a particular scale of the architecture. And I think I've mentioned this before, there's a particular sensitivity to the treatment of the materiality which constitutes the various forms of expressions. For instance, the beautiful resinous quality of the old Newah type of brickworking, where a particular type of, I think it was mustard oil and resin was combined with clay and a few other secret ingredients that some people claim particular knowledge of, combined to produce an extremely fine and elegant brick. And the way the bricks are masoned is exquisite. It's such a fine, thin, but extremely durable and strong bond that creates not only an elegant exterior, but one that has a tremendous visual integrity and communication of strength and durability, a certain majesty to the use of what are arguably humble materials. Also, the balancing of the treatment of the wood and the stone, and the way the different elements of the architecture are situated within the larger communal structures, within the bahals, the integration of the buildings. It's as if each one of the expressive forms of the material culture act in concert with and act both to contain and amplify the surrounding sensibilities of those things that surround them. So whereas each piece becomes part of, but more than the part of, and reflective of the larger whole. And the scale of the architecture is very humane. It's elegant. It has lofty, I'm thinking of the Nyatapola in Bhaktapur. It has a lofty, very majestic grandeur to it, but at the same time, it manages to maintain a touch with a certain human sensibility. It's very hard for me to describe. I mean, even the paintings, and I'm trying to think, I'm very frustrated with myself at this point. I should have made written notes. Some of the most elegant and famous Newari paintings that have been discovered show amazing sophistication of the placement of positive and negative space within the picture structures. And yet dynamic energies are contained within these placements. These are not formulaic works, although they do express themselves within iconographic constraints. They're very sophisticated, deliberate, thoughtful, and contained, self-contained works and elements. And that's why I keep going back to Florence, because Florence was all about the individual and all about the expressions of the big men within the community, and with always a nod to the divine. But the divine was always expressed through a certain accessibility and expression of humanity within the works. I don't know. I could really go on at length, but I'd have to get into a little bit more detailed work. So I don't know if I've gone too far afield in answering that, but
that being a Newah and I was born in Kathmandu, and I have been here in the United States for 20 years. So before that, I was in Nepal, and I had been witnessing all the arts form of the Newah community, but I didn't realize that much the way that you have expressing, and you are comparing that with the Florence. It's amazing. It's amazing. So what is hammering me in my thing is that, it's a shame on me that, being a Newah, that I don't know much about Newah art, and that the American who went all the way from America just to learn about that, and now we need the explanation from other than Newah. Yeah.
Ramesh, if I may interject for a moment before I forget this thought. There's an old expression: you never really see your country till you leave it. And there is something I did want to add to that in terms of the Newar's integration of materials and the humane aspect of it. And this is in one of the things that I'm particularly fond of is in how the Newars have expressed their love of nature and the natural world and incorporated it in much of their visual culture. And to use just one example, but for me, a real favorite example, the Darahitis. The Darahitis are so beautiful. These beautiful water catchments that, I've spent many a magnificent afternoon wandering through Bhaktapur and looking at all the little various permutations of the Darahitis, and then the grand ones, like the Mongol Darahiti outside of the Pat Museum. What a magnificent way of bringing humanity down into the earth to celebrate the most mundane chore, but the most elemental one of bathing and washing and drinking. But at the same time, through the very act of having to enter that space and those activities in the confines of the Darahiti, you become part of the divine. It surrounds you as you're working, and you actually elevate the very elemental activity, basic activity. And you also have it kind of visually gently but very firmly pummeled into your mind that those elemental gifts that you might be inclined to take for granted are very fragile, and they are given to you by the cosmos. You know, the nagas, the deities, the beautiful artwork. There's no parallel for the Darahitis anywhere else in the world. I mean, you have the great water tanks of India, but nothing on the intimate social scale that you have in Nepal. They're entirely unique.
Thank you, Maureen, walking us to the, I mean, the words that you have is amazing. I just can say the namaste to you at this moment, right? Now let me go back to Rabindra. And so we already crossed the 1 hour time. So we are almost at the end. So I have very few questions now left because of the time binding. So let me go back to the Rabindra. रविनजी, अब तपाईले यति धेरै ठुलो कामहरु गरिराख्नु भएको छ हैन, यो त के भयो भन्दाखेरि हाम्रो फ्यामिली आफ्नो हैन पिता पुर्खाले गरेर आउनु भएको कामलाई अग्रसरता लिएर तपाई अगाडि बढिराख्नु भएको छ। अनि यसमा के हाम्रो सरकार हैन, नेपाल गभर्नमेन्टले कस्तो किसिमको तपाईहरुलाई हेल्प गरिरहेको छ वा हैन, वा यो तपाईको आर्टलाई बचाउनु पर्छ वा यसलाई अझ प्रिजर्भ गर्ने वा यसलाई अझ प्रमोट गर्ने, त्यसको बारे नेपाल गभर्नमेन्टले तपाईहरुलाई के हेल्प गर्नु भएको छ कि छैन त?
गभर्नमेन्टको थ्रु भन्दा चाहिँ हेल्प चाहिँ छैनै भन्नुपर्छ। गभर्नमेन्टबाट चाहिँ केही हामीलाई केही सहयोग चाहिँ छैन। यो ह्यान्डिक्राफ्टमा चाहिँ केही सहयोग चाहिँ छैन।
त्यसैले तपाईहरुले रोके है त, त्यसैले गभर्नमेन्टको कुरा नगरौँ हैन, हरेक कुरा नेपालको पक्षमा स्पेशली आर्टमा चाहिँ प्रब्लम छ भने अब म जस्तो नेपालबाट बाहिर आएर बसेको नेपालीहरूले हैन, हामीले कसरी हेल्प गर्न सक्छौं? तपाई वा जस्तै पाटनमा हुनुभएका वा नेपालमा हुनुभएका हाम्रा कलाकारहरूको लागि हामीले कसरी हेल्प गर्न सक्छौं होला? तपाईलाई के लाग्छ?
अब मुख्य यसको विकासको लागि चाहिँ हैन, अब जस्तै अहिले पनि अब पहिला लिच्छवी कालमा त मन्दिरहरू बनाउँथ्यो नि, धेरै लिच्छवी कालमा मल्लकालमा धेरै काम हुन्थ्यो, विभिन्न मन्दिरहरू बनाउँथ्यो अनि कलाकारहरूलाई धेरै काम पाइन्थ्यो। तर अहिले चाहिँ कमी छैन। अब भन्नु पर्दाखेरि अहिले पनि अब विभिन्न त्यो मुख्यतया चाहिँ अहिले भन्नु पर्दाखेरि चाहिँ यो टिबेटनहरू हामीले काम गर्ने चाहिँ टिबेटन गुम्बाहरू चाहिँ धेरै नै बढिरहेछ। संसारभर, नेपालमा मात्र होइन संसारभर नै बढिरहेछ। यो टिबेटन त्यो गुम्बाहरूले गर्दा चाहिँ अहिले चाहिँ हामीलाई चाहिँ काम पाइरहेको हो। एउटा गुम्बा बनाउनलाई त्यहाँ चाहिँ धेरै नै मूर्तिहरू चाहिन्छ उहाँलाई, एउटा मात्र होइन धेरै नै मूर्ति चाहिन्छ हैन। अब यस्तै भएर चाहिँ अब गुम्बाको चाहिँ एकदम विकास भइरहेछ उहाँको टिबेटन गुम्बाहरूको चाहिँ। त्यसले गर्दा चाहिँ हामीलाई अलिकति सहयोग भइरहेछ कामको चाहिँ हैन। यस्तै अब काठमाडौँमा चाहिँ अब काठमाडौँमा नेपालमा पनि, काठमाडौँ मात्र नेपालमा पनि अब धेरै नै मूर्तिहरू बन्ने चाहिँ काम भइरहेछ, मन्दिरहरू हैन, ठुल्ठुलो मूर्तिहरू पनि बन्ने काम भइरहेछ अहिले। विभिन्न अस्ति भने नि अघि नै भने जस्तै त्यो ठुल्ठुलो मूर्ति विभिन्न ठाउँमा चाहिँ त्यो मूर्ति नै बनाउने त्यो प्रोजेक्टहरू धेरै नेपालमा पनि धेरै नै छ अहिले चाहिँ। यसले गर्दा चाहिँ हामीलाई काम चाहिँ पाइरहेछ भन्नु पर्यो।
ओके, अब त्यसले अब तपाईले एउटा अरु क्वेशन पनि थापे मैले हैन। यो अवस्थामा अब आज त रविन्द्र शाक्य हुनुहुन्छ हैन, अब आजको 100 वर्षपछि रविन्द्र शाक्यहरू जन्माउनलाई के गर्नुपर्छ होला त?
यसको लागि चाहिँ अब त्यही हो, यो सिक्ने चाहिँ कुनै अब संस्था छैन। अब कलेजहरू त्यस्तो चाहिँ यो मुख्य यो हाम्रो तामा पत्रकलाको विधा सिक्ने चाहिँ अब कुनै संस्थाहरू छैन। त्यही हो, अब हामीले चाहिँ अब काम गर्न आउनेहरूलाई चाहिँ अब सिकाउँदै जाने, जसको काम गर्ने इच्छा हुन्छ, हाम्रो काम गर्ने धेरैजना हुन्छ नि, उहाँहरूलाई सिकाउँदै जानुपर्छ। उहाँहरूले सिक्दै गयो कि चाहिँ अब मैले भने यो मानव सभ्यताको विकास क्रममा चाहिँ यो चाहिँ विकास भइरहेको कला हो। यो जस्तै प्रस्तर कला, त्यो काष्ठ कला, त्यो ढुङ्गामा गर्ने प्रस्तर कला त सबैले थाहा भएको कुरा हो। यो तामापाटाको मूर्ति बनाउनु चाहिँ पहिला चाहिँ बनाउँथ्यो हैन, मल्लकालमा चाहिँ धेरै विकास भएको थियो। त्यस्तै मैले तिब्बतमा घुम्न जाँदाखेरि त्यहाँ पनि 10वटा ठुल्ठुलो गुम्बामा घुमेको थिएँ। त्यहाँ पनि धेरै जसो मैले के पाएँ भन्दाखेरि तामा पाटकै मूर्तिहरू हो। अरू त्यो काठको उनीहरू भन्दा चाहिँ तामा पाटाको बनाएको चाहिँ धेरै मैले पाएँ। जस्तै उदाहरणको लागि चाहिँ हाम्रो जोखाङ मन्दिर सबैले थाहा भएको हाम्रो नेपाली त्यो फिरकुतीको भन्ने चाहिँ तिब्बतमा छ। सबभन्दा पुरानो त्यहाँ त सबै तामा पाटाको हो नि, छानादेखि मूर्तिहरू सबै होइन, त्यो त एकदम पुरानै। भनेपछि यो पछि विकास हुँदै जरा मानव सभ्यता विकास हुँदै क्रममा चाहिँ यसको पनि विकास भइरहेकै कुरा हो। त्यो चाहिँ पछि झन् विकास हुँदै आएको हो। अनि बिचमा चाहिँ यो लोप भइसकेको हो। जस्तै मान्छेहरूलाई थाहै छैन, तामा पाटाबाट ठुल्ठुलो मूर्ति बनाउँछ भन्ने थाहै छैन। काठको ढुङ्गाको त्यस्तो मात्रै बनाउँथ्यो। अहिले आएर चाहिँ यो ठुल्ठुलो मूर्ति बनाउने चाहिँ अब काम धेरै पाइरहेछ हामीले। मुख्यतया गुम्बाहरूले गर्दाखेरि नै हो होइन। अहिले चाहिँ यो कामको कमी चाहिँ भए छैन जस्तो लाग्छ। अहिले चाहिँ काम गर्नेहरू पनि अब यो तामापाटाको काम गर्ने मान्छेहरू पनि धेरै बढिरहेछ। त्यो मात्र अहिले त्यो प्रब्लम भएको हो। अहिले त यसो हेर्दाखेरि त अहिले काम ठिकै छ। अहिले त काम गर्ने मान्छेहरू नै बढिरहेछ यो पेसामा चाहिँ।
हजुर त्यसो म रविन्द्रजीलाई इलेक्सन रोकेर म Maureen कहाँ जान्छु होइन. So Maureen, we have a lot of questions, but among them, I would like to just read one of the questions that one of the audience has put in the Facebook message. What he is asking is that it's from the Sudeep Karanjit, and he says that questions to Maureen. Newah art is unique and beautiful. How can it be popularized? How can Newah artists make a living out of art? As artists have quit familiar artisanship to pursue other careers to make a living. What would be your suggestions?
I have no easy answer to that, unfortunately. That is a universal problem in every culture, unfortunately, and it is simply the nature of the modern world. Simply the nature of the modern world. There is a thought that as far as making Newah art popular, I don't know if popular is the right word that we should aspire to. I think awareness, making Newah art, putting Newah art before the gaze of as much of the world as possible in the best possible context, and in terms of growing cultural awareness of its sophistication and all its estimable qualities is really something that should be striven for, if that's the right word. One thought that I do have on that subject, though, is that in Japan they have an institution, if that's the proper description, for identifying and designating the very best of their artists that are traditional practitioners, and bestowing upon them an accolade of national treasure. And I don't know what the actual details are, but my understanding is that these artists are designated and identified by their government or receive a dependable income and a stipend, and also have some obligations as towards training, promoting, and preserving the practices that they represent. So I would love to see something like that happen in Nepal, and I would really encourage that. But I have to stress that, unfortunately, today it was in prior to the 1500s. The arts were very tightly aligned with the institutions of religion and government. And after the 1500s, at least, especially in the West, art gradually became increasingly separated from those institutions and less dependent upon them for patronage and survival. And with that came the ascent of the place of the individual. And I'm not placing any value judgments on those, but that is a dynamic that has been responsible for many of the problems that artists now face, especially traditional practitioners. Times have changed. There's globalization. There is commercialization. It is a very, very hard road. And Newah art itself has been so closely aligned with the representation and celebration and relationship with the divine, and then that in and of itself, places some substantial constraints upon the field. I mean, how many Buddhas can you cast in wax and sell? And in that respect, you're running up against the Chinese and any surrounding cultures the Indians that want to capitalize. That's not, I think, what Newah arts are after. I think it's really celebrating the best of what you have, the very best of what you have, understanding why what you have is the best. What are the best qualities? Understanding the history, understanding the context, understanding the relationship of those practices and those forms to the spiritual and intellectual and emotional and health and well-being of the larger communities. That is what needs to be stressed, not the commercialization of it. And the usage of the word, fame. Fame is very fleeting, and many poets have, made that very clear. I think you already have an abundance of wealth right within your laps, within the Kathmandu Valley. I think that the best of what you have should be preserved. And in many ways, the old Guti structures, bore a lot of credit for doing just that. I think contemporary Nepali society has to find perhaps a new structure or form of the Gutis that looks after the best of what it has, looks after the best of its artisans, and celebrates quality over quantity, and orients itself towards that. Those are kind of the disjointed responses that I have towards the viewer's very weighty question. It's a very complex question. There are a lot of moving parts to that question. So in the constraints of time that we have, and wanting to give Rabindra the last word, that's the best I can do for the moment.
Thank you. So we are almost at the end right now. So for the closing remarks, I'm requesting first to Rabindra, and I'll come to Maureen, that there may be so many things that you want to tell, but it didn't come when we are doing the conversation. So if there are anything that you want to say in the end, so first I'll go to Rabindra and I'll come to Maureen. So Rabindji, जाँदा जाँदै अब केही त्यस्तो तपाईलाई लागिरहेको कुरा यहाँ अहिले डिस्कस नभएको केही छ भने राख्दिनुस् न केही वर्डहरु।
हुन्छ। अब यो आजको टपिक चाहिँ नेवा आर्ट सम्बन्धी भयो हैन। नेवा आर्ट भनेकै अब हाम्रो मुख्यतया काठमाडौँ उपत्यकामा नै केन्द्रित छ। जति पनि यो काठमाडौँ उपत्यकामा मठ मन्दिरमा कलाकृतिहरू तिनीहरू सबै नेवा आर्ट नै हो। जस्तै अब यो काठमाडौँ मात्र होइन कि अब जुन हाम्रो टिबेटमा जति पनि अब पारो छ हैन, जस्तै भुटानमा भयो, त्यहाँ पनि अब नेपालीहरूले नै बनाएकै हो, त्यहाँको मान्छेहरूले बनाएको होइन। हाम्रो नेपालबाट नै त्यो कलाकारहरू गएर बनाएको मठ मन्दिर हो, त्यहाँको गुम्बाहरू पनि। जस्तै कि हाम्रो इतिहासमा छ नि अर्नीको, उहाँले पनि चाइनामा गएरै त्यो मन्दिरहरू बनाएको हो। त्यस्तै अब जति पनि भनौँ न, यो नेवा आर्ट चाहिँ अब संसारकै उत्कृष्टै कला हो। यो सबभन्दा उत्कृष्टै कला भन्नुपर्छ यसलाई। अब यो कलामा हाम्रो ढुङ्गा पनि पर्छ, काठको पनि पर्छ, त्यो धाटोको पनि पर्छ, अनि चित्र पनि एउटा हो, थाङ्का पनि एउटा हो, एकदम पुरानो। यो हाम्रै नेवा आर्ट हो। हामीले अब पर्यटकलाई संसारलाई देखाउन सक्ने हाम्रो नेपालको चाहिँ यही एउटा स्थान हो नि। नेवा आर्ट एउटा होइन मठ मन्दिर एउटा त्यही त नेवा यो काठमाडौँ उपत्यका मात्र होइन कि हाम्रो तिब्बतमा भुटानमा पनि हाम्रो काठमाडौँको आदिवासीहरू नेवार आदिवासीहरूले नै बनाएको कला हो यो चाहिँ जस्तै कि अब स्केच मात्र छ हामीसँग होइन हाम्रो पुर्खाले बनाएको जस्तै कि पहिला पहिला चाहिँ ठुल्ठुलो मूर्ति बनाउँदाखेरि चाहिँ हातले स्केच गर्नु पर्थ्यो अब मात्र सजिलो छ अब त सानो बनाएर अब फ्लेक्समा प्रिन्ट गरेर ठुल्ठुलो निकाल्न सकिन्छ आफूले चाहिने साइजमा निकाल्न सकिन्छ त्यो सजिलो भयो अहिले पहिला चाहिँ जत्रो मूर्ति बनाउनु हो त्यस्तै अब पेपरमा रफमा स्केच गर्थ्यो यस्तै स्केच एउटा हाम्रो घरमा धेरै छ यस्तो ठुल्ठुलो एउटा चाहिँ हामीले त्यो अमेरिकामा एउटा वासिङटन डिसीमा एउटा म्युजियममा राखेको छ होइन यस्तै हो हाम्रो यो गर्व गर्ने कुरा भनेकै नेपालको गर्व गर्ने कुरा भनेको यो मुख्य नै यो नेपाली नेवा आर्ट हो एउटा हाम्रो मठ मन्दिरै हो मेन त अब त्यसले यो गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ नेपालको चाहिँ अब के भने हाम्रो सानै भन्नु पर्यो नेवा आर्ट एउटा र होइन अब त्यही मठ मन्दिर हेर्नलाई नै पर्यटकहरू आउने गर्छ नि होइन टुरिज्म विकास भएछ काठमाडौँ उपत्यकामा होइन यस्तै हो अब यो पेसामा लागेकोले हाम्रो पुर्खौली पेसा हो होइन अहिलेसम्म हामीले निरन्तरण दिइरहेछ हामीलाई गर्व लाग्छ हाम्रो काम गरेपछि होइन सकेपछि चाहिँ हाम्रो गर्वै लाग्छ
धन्यवाद है रविनजी है आज अब तपाईँ पनि अब नेवा कलाकार होइन म पनि नेवा तर तपाईँलाई चिनाइ कसले चिनाइदियो त भन्दा अमेरिकन स्कलर ल्याएर तपाईँको बारेमा कुरा गर्नु परिरहेको छ होइन एउटा विडम्बना हो हामीले हाम्रो आफ्नो आर्टलाई चिन्न सकिरहेको छैनौँ होइन कोसिस गर्नेछौँ eDaboo जुन एउटा हाम्रो प्लेटफर्म छ त्यो नै के त भन्दाखेरि हाम्रो नेवा सिभिलाइजेसनका विभिन्न पाटाहरूलाई होइन यसरी नै कुराहरूलाई अगाडि ल्याएर सबैलाई जनमानसमा सेयर गर्ने हाम्रो परम्परा रहिआएको छ र अवश्य पनि आजको एपिसोडले केही न केही हाम्रा दर्शकवृन्दहरूमा पनि नेवा आर्ट सम्बन्धी कुराहरू केही बुझिसक्नु भएको पनि होला र यसलाई कसरी प्रवर्धन गर्न सकिन्छ सम्वर्धन गर्न सकिन्छ भनेर उहाँहरूले पनि सोच्नु होला भन्ने मैले आश गरेको छु अब चाहिँ म मौरीतिर जान्छु है त Okay, Maureen, so we're at the end, actually. So on your, closing remarks that, yes, if you have anything that, yes, we haven't covered it yet, and now it's your, I'm giving the floor to you, Maureen.
Well, thank you very much, Pramesha. First, I want to thank you for this wonderful opportunity. This was just really delightful. It was really wonderful to see Guruji again, especially during this very demanding and trying time of the pandemic. I would just say to the audience, I'd like to leave the audience with a few parting thoughts. The audience was very privileged tonight to listen to a great master, a great living master, the likes of which are very rare today worldwide. As a practitioner in an extremely demanding and elite practice, and their hearts and minds should be filled with justifiable pride at knowing that their culture is basically has an abundance of gifts still yet to be visualized. I would like to say also that they can patronize the best of their Newah artists, perhaps in their respective temples, mandirs. Perhaps they'd like to commission an icon for their homes, as I have done. Carefully do your research and give that commission to an honorable master. And also, I want to stress contributing. Find a preservation project within Nepal that you can contribute to, so that those magnificent heritage sites within the valley are maintained, and that perhaps even new ones can be built, and help your countrymen hold the lines against the encroachment of the materialized globalization flood, and your lives will be richer, and your hearts will be fuller, and your minds will be elevated.
Oh my gosh, those are really
and Guruji,
Namaste,
unlimited respect, health, and all things auspicious until we meet again soonish.
Thank you both. Thank you so much for the time, Maureen. And you have put tons of hours learning this Newah art. And again, yes, thank you so much for putting all those your works in the presentation today. And thank you for introducing me, Rabindra Shakya, who has been really a master of this Newah. Is typical art form of Newah. And Ravinji, thank you so much for the time that तपाईँले जुन टाइम दिनुभयो होइन त्यसको लागि धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद छ दर्शकवृन्द
धन्यवाद हजुर यहाँले मलाई इन्भाइट गर्नुभएकोमा मेरो मनको कुरा राख्नु पायो धेरै धन्यवाद तपाईँले धन्यवाद
हजुर दर्शकवृन्द है तपाईँले क्वेसन गर्नुभएको छ there are so many people they are asking that about the YouTube form of this particular program. So I'm very happy to tell that eDaboo, right? This is a 59th episode. And we have been helped now. We have teamed up with this Naulu Digital, that Rosan Puri. Similarly, we have Sunil Mathema and Sarat Shrestha from Naulu Digital. They have been really gracious, helping us on the technical side. And as well, they will be having this show on the YouTube. So when you go on the YouTube, you can just search for the Naulu Digital. So you will find this copy there also. And we will be sharing and in our Facebook as well. So
excellent.
We have spent really a good time. And still, there is a hunger inside me that to learn more about it. And it seems that possibly we may need to bring some other episode with Maureen again in the future. Definitely we'll do that. So I just see that there are so many comments here and so many people, they have been sending me the messages that it's really, really enlightened program and they want to hear more from the Maureen again. So hopefully that Maureen will give some time to us again in the future. And at the last, thank you, Maureen. Really appreciate. And eDaboo, has been trying to put the different aspect of the Newah civilization. So we just say that eDaboo as our mission is connecting the dots of Newah civilization. So Newah civilization, that is very unique. That what we say Newah people. Now we have some supporter like Maureen who can advocate about Newah civilization, not only the art. So we have someone who is inspiring us in this mission. So thank you so much, Maureen. And thank you so much. And our audiences that, they have been, really patiently, they have been listening to us. And without our audiences, this kind of show cannot be possible. And I have to thank so many people, but besides that, right, I would like to just take some of the names that from locally from Dallas. We have United Newah USA. My friends from United, colleagues and friends from United Newah USA, Vijay Bajracharya, Prajwal Maharjan, Umesh Shrestha. Likewise, on the technical side, we have from North Carolina, Manjil Shrestha, from California, Santosh Shrestha. And again, with Naulu Digital, they have been helping. And we have tremendous support from Old Newah organization, USA chapter as well. So thank you all the audiences and thank you so much to my colleagues. And send us your feedback as always and send us your questions so that we can just find the related people and we can bring it here. And we have started this series, Friends of NEPA. So before that, we were just talking with the Newah people and we were trying to connect all the dots. And with this series, Friends of NEPA, so Maureen is the first American whom, I could invite in the show. So prior to that, we have David Geller, who is from UK, and similarly, we have Masahiro-san from Japan. So I'm really thankful to Maureen for giving us a time. Same way, Ravinji, thank you so much. And so we are concluding at this moment. Thank you, audience. Until next episode, Hamuyata Subha.
Dhanyabad.
Dhanyabad. I guess that's over.